Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I love these live streams, and I love the themes that you guys come up with for questions. So uh, just to reiterate from the top of the hour, I'm answering questions about my show Savage Builds on the Discovery Channel, which is viewable on Discovery's streaming service right now. There are 10 episodes of goodness. We did everything from making a working ZF-1 gun from the Fifth Element with some help from the inimitable and unbelievable Gary Oldman. And we also made a suit of working Iron Man armor. What do I mean by working? I mean, it was made out of titanium, it was bulletproof, and it flies. Yeah. Savage Builds was a lot of fun. The first question we have is from John Hess, who says, in the Wheel of Death episode, if you could revisit it and had unlimited time and money, what would you do differently? Oh, I'd do lots of things differently. So to give you guys an understanding of what John's asking about, the Wheel of Death is a incredible World War II weapon called the Panjandrum. And one of the big issues for the Allies in breaching German beaches in France, yeah, that's correct for World War II. Breaching the German defenses on the coast of France. One of the biggest issues was that the Germans set out all these things, these giant things of rebar called Czech hedgehogs. They had hundreds, thousands of miles of barbed wire and mines and stuff. And then they had this huge 7-foot thick, super tall seawall at the end of the beach. And the Allies thought about making a device that could roll over all of those blockages and get to the seawall to blow it up. And what they designed was, I think it was like a 12-foot tall wheel. Here, actually. I mean, it didn't look too different than this wire spool here. 2 wheels, 12 feet tall, with a payload in the middle, several thousand pounds of explosives. And to power it, rockets attached to the wheels, right? Cary Grant and Tori approached this story for White Rabbit Project, if I remember correctly. Savage Builds, it was always on our list, and we actually built one. We built one with help from my friend Adam Steltzner from Jet Propulsion Laboratories. He's an unbelievable engineer and project lead. Adam is, when you saw the amazing lander of some of the Mars rovers, Adam and his team are the geniuses that let us land things on Mars and actually be able to use them. So Adam helped design this incredible device, and we built one to spec, and it didn't work that well. So we built our own. And again, we used rockets with the right propulsion, the right amount of time, and it's a spectacularly weird invention, but it's also, from an engineering standpoint, a really beautiful idea. Because if what you have is a whole bunch of blockages between you and your goal, just make wheels that can ignore blockages that large. That's genius. It's so crazy, it's genius. It's, dare I say, it is a Jamie Heineman type solution. So we'll just make some bigger wheels. Yeah. So our second execution, Adam Steltzner's amazing idea, was to put a pair of flywheels on either side of the Panjandrum and spin them up, and then use the braking of those flywheels to transfer that energy to the rotational movement of the Panjandrum. In theory, it was a great idea. In execution, we underestimated how much braking power we would need. We needed a lot more than the standard pair of caliper brakes from a truck. We thought that would be plenty. Turns out it's not plenty, not for the kind of energy transfer we were interested in. So it didn't work. That's fine. That's what happens when you experiment. I do want to tell you one story from production, which is that we lost the Panjandrum at one point. So we built 2 of these things, 12 foot tall, 2 wheels, like 6 feet apart. They're gigantic. And we mounted them to a flatbed to drive them down to this farm in Half Moon Bay where we were filming. And on the way, I'm just going to say it this way. On the way, one of the Panjandra, one of the Panjandrums fell off of our flatbed and spent a little bit of time rolling down a California road. Yeah. Luckily, it was like 4:45 in the morning. There was nobody else on the road. Amazingly, the Panjandrum rolled like, I think, a few hundred yards before hitting a tree and not being damaged. We were able to actually use it only a few hours later. I just remember my producer, Kwesi, calling. I was going, I'm running after the Panjandrum. And he's like running down the highway, down the road. Yeah. Luckily, no equipment, no people, no vehicles were harmed or injured. Oh my goodness, that was kind of scary. If I had my druthers, I would totally build another Panjandrum. I would totally, if Savage Builds got picked up for another season, I would be pitching redoing Panjandrum as one of the episodes. I think the idea of using spun up flywheels and braking force is a really, really clever idea. It's just, from a physics and engineering and energy standpoint, it was surprising how much braking force we required to start transferring that braking energy into forward momentum, forward movement energy. So yeah, if I had time and budget, I would do it again. Hopefully it would work this time. All right, let's see. So C2 Lawson wants to know, did I have any ideas for Savage Builds that I was unable to build? Well, yeah, we had, for a show like that, you start with a list of like hopefully 30 or 40 things that you want to do. And then, you start to look at you look at that list through a whole bunch of different lenses. So you look through, what is the stuff that I'm dying to do? What is the stuff that only this production could do? Those are two different questions. Because if there's something that only and to be clear, like the production team for this relied heavily on a lot of the expertise from the original Mythbusters production team. Yvette Solis and Jackson Marker were the two supervising directors and producers under John Tessier on that shoot, and they are both longtime veterans of Mythbusters. And so sometimes there's a lot of crossover between some of the experiments I've done and things like other YouTubers and other science show people have also done. So sometimes the metric that I like to look at is this something that only our team could pull off? Because that would be worth doing. We have a lot of weird expertise, this Mythbusters group, and to bring it to bear on something strange is really awesome and really fun. So that's another lens. Another lens is, what does the network love? What does the network hate? The network, for the most part, I've always found a pretty willing partner in Discovery. If something's really spectacular and I think it's spectacular, they have always wanted to do it. But sometimes you butt heads. Sometimes the network can't see how something's going to be exciting, and it can be exciting. I'll give one specific example. And I don't mean to, this isn't a trashing network executives talk, because everybody has their job within a production. They all answer to different people. They all have different metrics by which they need to do their job. And I respect that. But when we did the nitroglycerin episode, for instance, and the nitroglycerin episode was about ways to safely transport nitroglycerin. Famously volatile. If you had a jar of nitroglycerin in your hand and you dropped it, the story goes, the whole building would be vaporized. And there was a huge nitroglycerin explosion here in San Francisco back in the gold rush era. And we found an expert in nitroglycerin. You have to make it because nobody manufactures it anymore. You have to make it, and it's very expensive, like crazy expensive, like, Banaka expensive. And what we found in making the episode was that nitroglycerin is so dangerous, we never got to the plot of our episode. Nitroglycerin is so unpredictable, you can't count on it actually exploding under any specific circumstances. Yeah, well, I mean, we would do things that should be guaranteed to get an explosion, and we wouldn't. And we do things that would kind of maybe get an explosion, get huge explosions. It was terrifying. And in the end, the entire hour of television that we ended up making turned out to be just about how difficult it is to work with nitroglycerin, not at all the original plot. And in the original plot, what I had come up with, which I really love, was that I would bring in an engineering expert like my friend Michael Lynch or Danny Hillis or somebody, and we would, using only equipment and materials available to a gold rush era traveler, like tools from the 1850s, 60s, 70s, we'd use only tools and technologies available to that time to make some super gimbaled carrier for nitroglycerin. I love this idea. I love the idea of using modern engineering concepts, like, you know, using 1860s farm equipment to make a Steadicam, right? That's an inherently great juxtaposition. But we never got there because nitroglycerin is so awful and so difficult to use that we ended up making an hour in television just about that. But the thing is, I don't think I would have ever been able to pitch that episode, the one we ended up airing. Because a network exec would be like, really? It's just going to be like spinning your wheels the same way every single time? Which is a completely reasonable question if someone came to you and said, I'd like to do an hour of television that seems to be the same thing over and over, just raising the stakes every time, but achieving the same result. That is a difficult pitch. But there's also a difference between what happens in an episode and who it's happening to. And that's the kind of, you know, you can't quite say to a network executive, oh, it's going to be fun because I'm doing it. Like, that's not necessarily an answer. And yet it is kind of an answer. But the C2 Lawson, you're asking about ideas for Savage builds that we were unable to build. The thing is that a lot of the bigger items on that list, I'm still holding in reserve for another show or another execution. There are tons of like bigger, expansive builds that I continue to think about and dream about, and will eventually one day do. For instance, having recently brought my Samaritan to almost completion. This is all aluminum. I'm now feeling the desire to make one out of steel, to make one entirely out of steel, make a firing Samaritan out of steel. I would love to do that. That was on my list for Savage Builds Season 2, if we ever get there or got there. Because apparently, from what I understand from gunsmiths, this is oh, no, that's the wrong bullet. I want to pull out the silver one. Where is it? No? There we go. This is apparently a terrible relationship between bullet and the amount of powder projecting that bullet out of your gun. That this is a very anemic amount of power to power this bullet. That is a testable proposition, and I would love to do that. And someday I might. That's the only one I'm currently willing to share with you all. Thank you, C2 Lawson. Thank you for watching that entire video. If you'd like to support us further, you can head over to the Tested store. Links are in the comments below, and you can buy things like our demerit badges. You've heard of merit badges. These are the opposite. This one here is for measuring once and cutting twice. We went back and forth whether to measure once and curse twice, because that also happens. We went with the cut twice. And this is one of my all-time favorites. This is when you accidentally release the mysterious blue smoke that makes all electronics work, and then they no longer work. You can't release that smoke. Head over to our store, get yourself some demerit badges, and we will see you next time.